Revenge with Karen. There were still crumbs from a stale muffin on her desk when the CFO strutted in like he invented Excel. Beverly had just wrapped Q4 projections. Clean, precise, flawless down to the penny. The kind of spreadsheet that makes grown auditors weep. She'd pulled off the impossible, upsold 3 stagnant accounts, rescued a near-dead deal in Dallas, and sweet-talked a logistics VP who'd threatened to switch to their competitor mid-contract. 17 years in the trenches, and this was her reward quarter. The one with the 5-figure bonus dangled like a carrot during every soul-sucking leadership sync since June. She even wore her celebration heels that morning. The red ones she kept under her desk behind the backup mouse batteries and a dusty tin of Altoids. She clicked through the last client renewal, took a sip of microwave-burnt coffee, and waited for the ping from finance. It never came. Instead, what came was a walk-by shrug from the CFO and a chirpy, "Oh, hey Bev, real quick. Looks like bonuses are on hold this year." Budget review thing. You know how it is. No meeting, no explanation. Just that smarmy half-smile you'd expect from a guy who thinks a crypto punk is a business credential. She stared at him for 3 solid seconds, then smiled like a Sunday school teacher planning a homicide. Of course. I understand completely. She didn't say was, I built the damn budget. Her stomach dropped somewhere below the floor tiles. It wasn't the money, though it would have covered her niece's braces and her own backlogged dental work. It was the insult, the casual dismissal, like she was a number in the overhead column, a cost line to snip. Now, here's the funny thing. They say 97% of folks who listen to stories like this never hit subscribe. Wild, right? Meanwhile, I'm out here bleeding spreadsheets and corporate trauma for your entertainment. So if you're part of the 3% with a soul, smash that like button and subscribe. It keeps this crew fueled and the revenge stories rolling. Back to Bev. She sat at her desk for another hour pretending to be deep in budget revisions, but her mind was already drifting backward, 17 years ago, to the chaos of the early days. When the company was 5 people and a shared Keurig, she negotiated her first offer letter with a handshake and a clause no one paid attention to because it was standard language. She remembered the line she had argued to include, scribbled in the margins of her employment agreement, and later typed up clean. In the event of termination without cause or material compensation breach, all client-facing intellectual property, authored or managed by the employee, shall revert to the employee in full. They called it cute. She called it insurance. That night, Beverly didn't pour wine. She poured documents. Old PDFs, payroll records, archived email threads. Her original contract lived in a manila folder inside a drawer no one else had opened since 2012. She scanned it with steady fingers, emailed herself a copy under the subject line 14B Final, and uploaded a backup to a private cloud server she hadn't touched since her divorce settlement. It wasn't rage she felt. It was something colder, cleaner, like the click of a seatbelt before a demolition derby. This wasn't just about her bonus. This was about respect, ownership, and the arrogance of men who forgot that the heart of the company didn't wear a tailored suit or showboat at the quarterly town hall. It wore flats, kept her head down, and remembered everything. The next morning, she wore flats again. The red heels went back into the drawer. Celebration was postponed, or maybe relocated, because Beverly wasn't staying. She was plotting. The room smelled like too much citrus and too little sincerity. Beverly sat across from the CEO in Conference Room B, known among staff as the Gaslight Suite, because nothing honest ever came out of it. There were 2 new board members on the video call, a grinning VP with all the backbone of a breadstick, and the CEO himself, Mason, wearing a blazer he hadn't earned, and the smug look of a man who thought loyalty was a subscription you could cancel at will. He started with buzzwords: lean pivot, strategic bandwidth, operational synergy. The corporate mating call for "we're screwing you," but in a way that sounds like Harvard. Then came the dagger. So about bonuses, there's been a realignment of incentive structures, Mason said, adjusting his gold cufflink like it was a nervous tick and not a status flex. Yours, unfortunately, is deferred. Not canceled, just paused. Budget cycle's tighter this year, you know how it is. He smiled, that smile, like he was doing her a favor. Beverly nodded, didn't blink, didn't ask questions. That would have given him the satisfaction of watching her squirm. But inside, her chest was hollowing out, not from shock, but from something uglier, something older. The realization that this wasn't just a missed check. It was a severing, dismissal of 17 years of pulling revenue from dust. of flying out to Reno last minute to salvage a furious account, of staying up nights building onboarding flows no one else even knew how to maintain. He was smiling because he didn't think she'd fight. He was smiling because he thought he'd won. She stood, smiled back. "Thanks for the transparency," she said, each syllable dipped in battery acid. "I'll adjust expectations accordingly." And she did, not the way he thought. On her drive home, she didn't play her usual jazz station. She sat in silence, white-knuckling the steering wheel like it owed her an apology. Her Honda Civic had more integrity than that boardroom. The check engine light had been on for 6 months, and yet it still showed up. She pulled into her driveway at dusk. The porch light flickered like it knew this was a night for reckoning. Inside, she kicked off her shoes, fed her cat, Peaches, never betrayed her, and went straight to the hallway closet, top shelf, behind an old curling iron and her ex-husband's unopened mail. A dusty accordion folder labeled OLD-SHT. She carried it to the kitchen table like a relic from a war museum. The paper had yellowed, but her handwriting hadn't aged a day. There it was. Clause 14b, nestled in legalese like a landmine with a smiley face sticker. In the event of material compensation breach, all client-facing assets developed, authored, or structurally owned by the employee revert to said employee in full. They never redlined it, never asked her to remove it, because back then she wasn't a threat. She was the nice girl who just wanted a stable job and a little protection for her work. She wasn't supposed to remember, but Beverly remembered everything. She scanned the page, uploaded it twice, once to her encrypted drive and once to a burner Gmail she hadn't used since 2014. She titled it, "In Case of Cowardice." She didn't cry, she didn't rage. She microwaved leftover lasagna and stared at her calendar. She had 2 weeks until the next quarterly sync. 2 weeks to turn Clause 14b from a forgotten sentence into a blueprint. Beverly had been the keeper of the kingdom's keys. The passwords, the call scripts, the CRM workflows they assumed ran on magic. They thought they were trimming fat. They didn't realize they were about to amputate their spine. The next morning, Beverly's alarm went off at 6:15 like it always had. No snooze, no exceptions. But something in her had changed. Not in a fireworks and revenge fantasy kind of way. No, it was cleaner than that. Quieter. When you flip a switch and realize the hum that's been droning in the background for years has finally stopped. She wasn't angry anymore. She was activated. By 6:40, she was at the kitchen table in sweatpants, glasses perched on her nose, with 3 manila folders spread out like a tarot reading. One was labeled Original Offer. The second, Client Systems. The third was unmarked, but full of printed workflows she designed from scratch, colored tabs still intact from the days she used to run training sessions for junior reps who now made more than her. Clause 14b sat in the middle, highlighted, underlined, typed in font so boring it dared you to ignore it, but Beverly remembered the fight it took to keep it in. It was back in the days when the company still ran payroll from a shared Dropbox account, and they paid her in partial equity and IOUs. She had brought it up casually, just a little IP protection clause, nothing fancy, and Mason, back then still in hoodies and humility, waved it through without a second glance. "Sure, Bev, you built the thing. Of course you should keep your stuff if we screw you over." They had no HR back then. No compliance team to comb through clauses. Just a lawyer on retainer who probably spent more time golfing than reading contracts. And so, like so many forgotten seeds buried in the dirt, Clause 14b had been left untouched. Until now. She reread the clause 5 times, word for word. She Googled similar precedents, cross-checked it against Ohio employment law, called an old college friend who now taught contracts at a state university, and read it to her over speakerphone while feeding Peaches. The friend went silent for a beat. Then, holy shit. Bev, that clause is a grenade in a filing cabinet, and they just pulled the pin. By 9:00 a.m., Beverly had scanned the signed document and saved it in 4 places. Her encrypted cloud, a password-protected USB drive taped under her desk, a printed hard copy folded into a hollowed-out copy of Good to Great, and a backup sent to her sister in Illinois with instructions. Open if Mason ever trends on Twitter. She wasn't just covering her bases. She was building a bunker. The company, meanwhile, rolled on like nothing had changed. Mason sent out a chirpy Slack update about fiscal fitness and collaborative trimming. The new VP posted a selfie from the Monday meeting, captioned, "Leading with Vision." Proud of this team, Beverly liked the post. then muted the entire company channel. She spent the afternoon watching CRM logs, taking quiet inventory. Every custom onboarding template she'd written, every call script that bore her voice, every pipeline report with formulas they didn't even understand. She realized something that made her laugh out loud, an actual snort of disbelief over her sad little yogurt lunch. They thought they owned this. But what they had was access. Temporary access, like kids borrowing the family car and thinking that made them owners. Beverly didn't slam doors. She didn't make noise. She just opened a separate document, titled it Wind Down Protocol, began listing every asset she'd built that could be reclaimed. She color-coded by priority, made notes on dependencies, drafted soft exits for each client. The list got long fast, and the terrifying part, if you were the company, was that everything she wrote down, none of it required breaking a single rule. They fired the wrong person the right way. And now Clause 14b was more than fine print. It was a reckoning. They called it a realignment of workflow synergies, because of course they did. HR didn't even have the decency to schedule it in her usual conference room. Instead, they shoved her into one of those newly redesigned Zoom pods, glass box, fake fern, air like wet printer paper, and delivered the news like it was a damn tech's audition. "We've been evaluating department efficiencies," said Megan from HR, who still thought adding exclamation marks to emails was a personality trait. "And in the spirit of growth, we're excited to streamline your role and introduce a new leadership layer. Translation, you're being demoted, without saying the word demoted, by someone whose resume is still wet." Beverly kept her expression neutral. She had trained herself, over years of back-to-back client calls and executive briefings, to mask contempt so well it looked like curiosity. "So," she said calmly, "just to confirm, I'll now be reporting to Rachel." Megan lit up like she was delivering a gift. "Yes, Rachel is dynamic, forward-thinking, and brings a fresh perspective from fintech. We really think you two will complement each other." Beverly knew Rachel. Rachel once CC'd the wrong client on a pricing dispute and blamed the CRM. Rachel once asked Beverly how to convert a PDF to spreadsheet vibes. Now Rachel was her boss, not because Rachel was better, because Rachel was cheaper. Beverly didn't flinch. "Perfect," she said, nodding slowly. "Could you send me a copy of the updated organizational chart and my new title, just so I can align my documentation?" Megan blinked. "Of course. I'll have that over by end of day," and Beverly smiled, because in writing is how lawsuits begin. She left the meeting, walked straight to her desk, and did something that would have gone unnoticed by anyone who wasn't paying attention, so everyone. She opened her shared workflow folder. One HR insisted all processes live inside, and began quietly revoking access. Not all at once. That'd raise alarms. Just one folder here, one script archive there. Renaming files so they appeared to be duplicates, but weren't. Password protecting old client briefs for compliance. Setting up sync errors that could be easily blamed on Google Drive's constant updates. Then she copied everything to an external local directory on her machine, and she'd labeled years ago Client Backup 2018. No one ever looked inside it because it sounded old, dusty, and irrelevant. Inside it was everything. Workflow maps, onboarding templates, automation triggers, call scripts, crisis protocols, success email templates, everything. Built by her for her in her voice. She moved faster than she expected. Not panicked, precise. Like a surgeon prepping for the quietest operation of her life. Meanwhile, Rachel sent her first official touch-base email. Subject line, excited to collaborate. Beverly didn't respond. She printed it, dated it, filed it under pretext. That night, she updated her resume, not to apply for new jobs, but to refresh her memory of what she was truly worth. She hadn't looked at it in almost a decade. The bullet points read like the backbone of a Fortune 500 launch strategy. She laughed bitterly. Built their empire on her bones, and were now acting surprised she had a spine. Peaches curled around her legs as she typed. She drafted another document, transfer protocols, priority clients. She wasn't stealing anything, not yet. She was preserving her work. They hadn't fired her. No, they thought they were smarter than that. But Beverly knew what this was. It was war dressed up as mentorship. She'd been documenting every shell casing since the first smile that didn't reach their eyes. The quietest betrayals are the hardest to detect, and the most effective. That's what Beverly told herself as she sat at her desk Tuesday morning, cardigan on, hair pinned, smile practiced. She looked like every other seasoned mid-manager, grinding through her inbox. But beneath the surface, she was peeling wires from a live system she'd designed with her own hands. She started with the CRM triggers. These were her crown jewels, automated sequences that welcomed new clients, tracked renewals, flagged contract risks, and delivered handwritten feeling emails she'd a /B tested down to the subject line. Most of the team assumed those functions were native to the software. They weren't. They were scripts Beverly had written in the margins of sleepless nights and thankless weekends. With a few clicks, she exported the logic trees and rebuilt them in a sandbox environment on her personal server. No company assets, no stolen code, just her own original syntax, annotated and reorganized. Neater, sharper, clean. Then the onboarding templates, dozens of them, each tailored to industry verticals, account sizes, and executive temperament. She had one for the skeptical CTOs, one for the eager founders, one for the legacy holdouts who still used fax machines. She exported the full suite and red-idled them. Legacy Comms Sede. The naming convention was just ambiguous enough to pass as an old archive. Her contact list was next. Technically, it wasn't a corporate list. It was her own hand-built directory of relationships she'd nurtured for nearly 2 decades. Birthdays remembered, kids' names, preferred snacks during QBRs, allergies, political leanings, divorce settlements. The kind of intel that couldn't be bought or mined, it had to be earned. She exported it all into a personal CRM tool she'd quietly subscribed to for years, something she'd used during her side consulting gig ages ago. No one ever asked about it. Why would they? Beverly was reliable, predictable, invisible, but not anymore. Each night that week, she scheduled one-on-one calls with key accounts. Just checking in, she'd say. No agenda. She asked how the new workflows were treating them. She asked about pain points. She asked how they felt about the transition to the new service tiers Mason had quietly rolled out. Most hadn't heard of them. One VP of operations, 6-figure account, sighed into the receiver. Honestly, Bev, it's been clunky since your team got reorganized. Half the onboarding feels templated. We miss how you used to do things. Beverly jotted it down. Appreciate the candor, she said, smiling with the warmth of a goodbye hug. Another client, a CFO she'd once sat beside at a disastrous tech summit dinner, confided that he'd been approached by a competitor, but was holding off because of you, Bev. You've always been my North Star in this circus. She thanked him, then marked him green on her spreadsheet. By Friday, she had 27 clients flagged as warm. 12 of those handled over half the company's annual recurring revenue. All of them trusted her, not the logo on their invoices. Back at the office, Rachel pinged her, "Hey, can we start syncing weekly on pipeline health? Want to get visibility into your rhythms?" Beverly stared at the message. "Sure," she replied. "Let's connect next week." She copied the message, filed it, timestamped it. Then she pulled up her wind-down protocol doc and added a new section, communication cued over strategy. There was no anger in her movements. No chaos, just surgical precision. She wasn't sabotaging. She was reclaiming. Every click, every file transfer, every polite check-in call, it was like diffusing a bomb she'd been ordered to forget. Only now, she wasn't cutting wires to save the company. She was cutting herself free. And no one in that building had the faintest idea that the entire skeleton of their operation was slipping out the door, one vertebra at a time. The first real symptom appeared on a Wednesday morning, masked as a harmless hiccup. "Hey," a junior rep called across the open office floor, brow furrowed, screen frozen mid-load. "Anyone else getting an error on the Tier 1 dashboard?" A few heads popped up, shrugs, then silence. Rachel, the newly minted team lead, walked over in heels too loud for someone that unqualified and peered over his shoulder. "Try refreshing. Might be a cache thing." He did. Nothing. The screen blinked, then populated with blanks where client names, contract statuses, and renewal alerts used to be. Just white boxes. Like ghosts had moved in overnight. Probably the update from IT, Rachel muttered. "I'll ping someone." But no one did. Beverly, meanwhile, was on vacation. At least, that's what HR's auto-reply said. In truth, she was sitting at her kitchen table in fuzzy socks, sipping lukewarm tea and watching the entire system creak under the weight of its own arrogance. The dashboards weren't broken, were simply gone, or more precisely, decoupled. The workflows were technically still there. But the triggers, the scripts that tied the logic together like a vascular system, those lived in a proprietary structure she had authored, refined, and quietly removed. She hadn't deleted anything. That would be too obvious, too amateur. No, she had simply unplugged the core wires from the wall and left the shell standing. It looked alive from the outside. but it wasn't breathing. Back at the office, onboarding flows that once worked like a charm now stalled at step 4. A form wouldn't autofill. A welcome email went unsent. An entire product training module skipped forward to the end like a scratched DVD. Rachel, now under pressure, convened a Tiger team to troubleshoot. They brought in 2 DevOps guys, neither of whom had ever actually spoken to Beverly, but knew her name because her code was the only one that never broke. Weird, one said, frowning at a half-empty JSON file. These API calls look clean, but they're not triggering anything. Can we roll back to an earlier version? Rachel asked. Technically, yes, he said slowly, but the custom scripts were locally hosted and mirrored to her machine. They weren't backed up to the repo, so, unless she still got them, Rachel interrupted. She's on PTO. The other guy looked up. When she back, Rachel didn't answer. Later that afternoon, VP and Client Success forwarded an email to Mason with a subject line that simply read, why are the account maps blank? Mason didn't panic. Not yet. He called it growing pains, reminded everyone they were transitioning to a flatter structure, and scheduled a Friday all-hands to address alignment concerns. Meanwhile, clients were already noticing. 2 onboarding leads from separate enterprise accounts flagged issues in their Slack threads, missing modules, late asset delivery, and auto-responses signed by the client success team instead of the personal names Beverly had always used. The human layer was gone, and people noticed. Internally, blame pinballed from one team to another. IT said it was a data layer issue. Marketing blamed an old Zapier integration. Someone floated the idea that the CRM had pushed an unstable patch. No one thought to ask the woman who had architected the entire system, because they assumed she was irrelevant. And Beverly, she sat on her back porch that evening, laptop closed, watching a thunderhead roll over the trees. Calm as a sniper with infinite patience. Her phone buzzed once, a message from a former client. Noticed a few things slipping over there. Hope you're doing okay. Let's grab lunch soon, she replied with a thumbs up. The silence growing inside the company wasn't just technical. It was trust, evaporating like steam from a cracked pipe, kind of silence that makes you realize too late that something fundamental is missing. And somewhere in a locked drawer under Rachel's desk sat a printed email chain labeled Pipeline Ownership Clarification Beverly. Unopened, unread, and already outdated. At 8:02 a.m. sharp on a Monday that would soon be known internally as the day everything slipped, Beverly's resignation landed like a grenade in HR's inbox. No fanfare. No warning, just a subject line that read, Formal Notice of Resignation Clause 14b. The body of the email was surgical. Dear Megan, due to material changes to my agreed-upon compensation and a resulting breach of contract, I hereby submit my resignation, effective immediately. Please see the attached PDF for reference, timestamped, and annotated. All company property will be returned by COB today. Regards, Beverly M. Caldwell. The PDF was titled simply, Clause 14b Activation PDF inside. A scanned, signed copy of her original employment agreement, highlighted, bookmarked, and notarized with a fresh digital timestamp, showing the exact moment her bonus was revoked. A polite one-page cover note outlined her legal position. Under the clause negotiated during the company's early years, her authored and managed client-facing systems, CRM workflows, pipeline frameworks, and client experience documentation legally reverted to her, effective upon breach. She didn't scream, she didn't threaten, she documented. By 8:11, Megan and HR had escalated to Mason. By 8:17, legal had their hands on the file and asked the most dangerous question in corporate America. Is this real? It was. Binding. Signed. Filed. They'd overlooked it for 17 years. Forgot the old clauses. Assumed her loyalty would override the fine print. At 8:23, Mason called IT and barked, lock her out of everything. Too late. Beverly had already run her exit protocols 2 days prior. She'd backed up every script she authored, archived every contact workflow, pipeline model, onboarding funnel, and system logic tree. Not company documents, her intellectual property, filed and timestamped under her name per the clause. Had it stored across 3 encrypted drives, plus 1 hard copy in her sister's fireproof safe. They revoked her access like it mattered. Meanwhile, the system she built began coughing up error messages like a dying mainframe in a bad sci-fi flick. Calendars desinced. Onboarding triggers stalled. Contract renewal reminders failed to fire. Automated success emails stayed stuck in draft limbo. Executive flagged a blank screen during a client metrics meeting and muttered, "Did the CRM get hacked?" Nope, it had just lost its lungs. At 8:47, a junior IT analyst who had the misfortune of reading through her resignation file aloud in legal's conference room whispered, she didn't steal anything, she owned it. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds. By 9 o'clock, the internal Slack was bedlam. Whisper threads. Did Bev really leave? What's 14B? Is that why the triggers aren't firing? Rachel, bless her clueless soul, posted a wide-eyed emoji in the team channel and asked, "So, who's managing the Q2 pipeline now?" Silence. Then came the real kick to the corporate teeth, Beverly's resignation auto-reply. "Thank you for reaching out. As of today, I am no longer with the company. For client continuity or transition requests regarding any systems I previously managed, please refer to Clause 14B in my contract or contact your legal representative." Beverly Caldwell Mason's inbox lit up with frantic emails from enterprise clients, confused by missed onboarding steps and delayed comms. One even wrote, "We assumed Beverly was still leading. We don't recognize the new team." Beverly didn't check her work email again. Didn't need to. At home, packed the last of her desk drawer memorabilia. A paperweight shaped like a snail, slow and steady closes the deal, a thank you card from a client's kid, and a company pen she'd kept mostly out of spite. She dropped the badge in a padded envelope, sealed it, and walked to the post office in total silence. Not a single tear, not a single tremble, only the precise calm of someone who had detonated the exit hatch and watched the airlock suck the arrogance out with it. By Thursday morning, the office sounded like a malfunctioning air conditioner, tense, rhythmic, just loud enough to drown out common sense. What started as a few bugs had mutated into something no one dared to say out loud. The pipeline was vanishing. 3 of the company's largest accounts had gone silent. Not slow, not skeptical. Silent. No follow-ups. No Slack replies. No one answering phones. Just stiff autoresponders. And we'll revisit after Q2 messages sent to client success reps, who now looked like they'd seen ghosts. One manager tried to spin it as holiday fatigue, until someone gently reminded him it was March. By noon, legal had identified at least 5 enterprise clients whose original onboarding architecture was authored entirely by Beverly. And without her, without the logic, workflows, personal rapport she'd maintained like an obsessive gardener, those accounts were withering. At 2:36 p.m., Rachel pinged Mason on Slack. "Client Delta just marked our renewal proposal as under review. That's $1.8 MARR. Mason didn't respond, because at 2:34 p.m., he'd received a text from an ex-VP now working for a competitor. Just one line, "Heads up, Beverly's launching something. I'd watch your client list." He stared at it for a full minute, blinking like a man who'd just been told the brakes had been missing from his car all week. The boutique firm was called Narrowbeam Strategies. No press release, no banner ad, just a quiet website with an intake form and a client promise, tailored onboarding, trusted relationships, designed by the person who built your pipeline. It was so subtle you might have missed it, till you realized every service listed matched Beverly's signature touchpoints, down to the exact phrasing used in her onboarding emails from years past. By Friday, 3 more companies reached out, not to Mason, not to legal, but to the email listed on Beverly's new site. One of them was the legacy logistics client who'd been with the company since it ran out of a WeWork office in Dayton. Email read, "We've been reviewing the new client structure at company name. Honestly, we don't recognize the experience anymore. We trust Beverly. Let us know next steps." That line, "We trust Beverly," was screenshotted, printed, and hand-delivered to Mason by Megan in HR, who hadn't slept in 2 days. It was also the moment Mason finally cracked. He picked up his phone and dialed Beverly directly, something he hadn't done in over a year. The call rang 4 times before it went to voicemail. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. He knew better. At that exact moment, Beverly was at a local cafe downtown, sipping cold brew and sketching out her onboarding flow on a yellow legal pad. She wore a cardigan, jeans, and the satisfied smirk of a woman who'd finally stopped shrinking herself to fit inside someone else's revenue model. Across from her sat a former enterprise client, now her first confirmed contract. Honestly, the client said, stirring their coffee, the only reason we didn't leave earlier was you. The second you left, the whole place felt empty. Beverly nodded. She didn't have to sell anymore. She was the product. She flipped to a new page on the legal pad. Let's talk launch timeline. And just like that, what had once been the company's strongest pipeline became its loudest silence. No drama, no lawsuits, just quiet exits, guided by trust, and a woman they'd once thought was replaceable. A full week passed before the corporate heart attack finally landed in public view. At 9:06 a.m. on a Monday, inboxes across the industry lit up with a crisp, understated press release. Narrowbeam Strategies launches. Former director unveils client-centered alternative to enterprise onboarding. No fluff. No exclamation points. Just a bulletproof announcement of a firm built on continuity, care, and the woman who'd quietly architected the most trusted onboarding systems in the business. Underneath the fold was the kicker. Led by Beverly Caldwell, former director of client experience, Narrowbeam has already partnered with multiple longtime clients seeking personalized service and strategic stability. Multiple, of course, being a polite synonym for most. Mason saw it before it hit LinkedIn. He threw his phone across his office and shattered a decorative mug with "World's Best Team Builder" written on it. The irony hit harder than the ceramic. By noon, internal finance projections showed a 47% collapse in Q2 revenue. 3 major enterprise accounts had formally terminated contracts, citing a misalignment in communication and process. 2 more requested full audits of their onboarding systems. One, bless their bluntness, sent an exit notice with one line: "We found someone who already knows us." The board called an emergency strategy meeting that afternoon. Mason walked into the room without slides, without spin, without a single word that could change what was already happening. He knew it was over when one board member asked, "Why does our infrastructure feel like it followed her out the door?" Because it did. At that very hour, in a sunlit co-working space across town, Beverly sat across from her second signed client, a medical logistics firm she'd onboarded 4 years ago, now eager to return to the hands that had built their original growth model. She wore no badge, no brand, no borrowed authority. Just a quiet confidence and a fresh onboarding packet, identical in design to the one they remembered. Only this time wasn't shackled to some bloated hierarchy or diluted by a dozen hands. This one was cleaner, simpler, hers. The client flipped through the pages, smiled, and said, "This feels like coming home." Beverly nodded, reached for her pen, and jotted a few notes on their preferred integration stack. "We'll have a roadmap ready by Thursday. And this time, you'll know exactly who's touching your data. No middle layers, no performative synergy. Just service built on earned trust." As the meeting wrapped, she powered down her laptop, leaned back in her chair, and took a long sip of still warm coffee. The sun cut across the floor in long stripes. She felt no guilt, no rush, just the settling weight of something deeply, quietly just. She didn't torch bridges. She rewired them, not with vengeance, but with design. Because in the end, the story wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition. They'd slashed her bonus thinking it would save them money. But Beverly was never a line item. She was the asset. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.